One of the things that Stephanie said was that, if it had been against the law, I wouldn't have done it. This is a Christian person saying this, that the law is a teacher. I drove on the interstate to get here today. Nobody passed me doing 130 miles an hour because it's against the law and we enforce it. Everyone knows what the law is, and so they mostly behave. We are blessed to live in a representative republic where most of our laws agree with God. What a blessing in Western civilization that we have this heritage passed down from the Romans through the Magna Carta, and that we have this concept that law is based on God and His eternal truth and justice. His will is the basis of our law. We live in a great nation, a nation that recognizes that, and our founders built our system of government on that. We live in a system where there are overlapping jurisdictions. We're familiar with the concept of local jurisdiction, of living under the laws of a city and of a county, of a state and of a nation. And each area of authority has its own laws. And they're not supposed to overlap, but when the higher law speaks, then the lower law is not relevant. We understand this. So let me ask you about the hierarchy of law under which we live, because this all comes down to the rule of law. This is the key to everything. If we understand our system, and if we understand the rule of law, then we understand how to abolish abortion. Just as our forebears understood the rule of law and the basis of law and abolished slavery and have abolished many other things. You ladies in the audience today are able to vote and all kinds of other things because we understand the rule of law and what it means to be a human being. So let me ask you this. What is the highest law of all that any human being anywhere, anytime on the planet has to obey? God's law is the basis of our law. That's number one. So an executive, a king, a governor, a police officer, any magistrate who has any authority, where did that authority come from in the first place? It came from God. Does he need any other law other than God's law to do what is right before God? He doesn't. This is the only law we need to abolish abortion. But isn't it great that in the United States of America, most of our laws agree with God? What's the next highest law that we live under that trumps all the others where it speaks appropriately and agrees with God's will? The Constitution of the United States. And yet we are told over and over and over again that abortion is unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional. They just keep repeating the lie until everyone else repeats it like a parrot and kind of believes it. But what does the actual law say itself? Right there in the 5th and the 14th Amendment, we have a constitutional guarantee to the right to life. Our government is not allowed to sanction or allow the taking of any life without due process of law, which means that someone has been found guilty. You cannot take an innocent life. And furthermore, we guarantee in our nation the equal protection of the law to every human being. So is abortion constitutional? Absolutely not. And we have to stop halting any and every conversation with any friend in any Facebook post where somebody refers to a constitutional right to abortion. Say, time out, stop, no. Correction, that is not what our highest law says. And what is the next highest law after the federal Constitution that we might look to? We would look to our state constitutions, wouldn't we? Did you know every state in the Union repeats that right to life in the state constitution, that you can't take it without due process? And here in Oklahoma, we go one better. In Article 2, Section 2, our state constitution says, all persons have the inherent right to life in our state constitution. What's the next highest law that we're all subject to in the states where we live? Now we start getting down to state statutes, don't we? Is it wrong to murder? Yes. Killing an innocent human being is murder, isn't it? That's homicide. Would you like to see what our state homicide code says? We actually define homicide over there in Title 21, and here's what it says. Homicide is the killing of one human being by another. Does that include abortion? Yes, it does. But just in case that wasn't clear enough, Part B says, as used in this section, human being includes an unborn child. It's already in our statutes. We're just not enforcing the law. And we have one other little minor issue to contend with. There are other statutes that are contradictory to this. And even within the homicide code itself, Part C says homicide shall not include a legal abortion. Say what? You just said it was murder. Abortion is murder, but it's not. Abortion is murder, but it's not. Have you seen the bumper stickers that say, let's just all get along? These statutes cannot coexist. They are logically contradictory. There's no such thing as a round square. You can't say it's murder, but it's not. That's not right. That is a logical contradiction in the law. So what do we do when we have these laws that contradict each other? Do we not ask ourselves which ones are greater? Which ones trump the other ones? Pun intended. So which laws are greater? The hundreds of pages of pro-life regulations that treat abortion as health care and say that it's legal. We have statutes on the one side that say it's just health care. And on the other side, we have the United States Constitution that says, no, you are guaranteed a right to life and equal protection of the law. It's also in the state constitution, and we have homicide codes in every state that say murder is wrong. Which is greater? Which should we uphold? Isn't it obvious? So what do we do when we have contradictory laws? Very clearly, you uphold the higher law. Not all laws are equal in status. Sometimes they contradict each other, even when they're valid laws. Recognize the Lord healed people and did lots of other ministry and work on the Sabbath. But their law said, don't work on the Sabbath. But he worked on the Sabbath. But don't work on the Sabbath. But he worked on the Sabbath. What was he doing? He was telling the civil authorities, you've got your priorities all wrong. You don't understand the rule of law. If your son falls in the ditch on the Sabbath, would you not go do what is right and rescue him? There is a hierarchy of law, and sometimes you have to choose what is right to do in that situation. Jesus taught that. Sometimes to uphold a higher law means that you have to break a lower one, because there is a contradiction, or because it's wrong, or because it's not right in this situation. And you have to look to the highest, higher laws. You might have to trespass to save a neighbor. A few weeks ago, I was out with Tina Brown at our local death camp, abortion death camp, interposing, trying to save children. There's a property line there. Sometimes we get excited and step a little bit over it when we call out to people. And then they call the cops, and then the cops come out and they say, okay, we just want everyone to be safe and legal here. You have a right to be here, you have a right to protest and speak out, but you just don't cross that line. You just need to stay on the public property, that's their property. And I'm thinking to myself, if the Allies had used this approach, they would have stood at the border of Germany with a sign that said, please don't kill any more people. And it would have been really ineffective. Friends, the Allies were trespassing at Auschwitz, and it was the right thing to do. You uphold the higher law. We've been here before. There's been times when we've seen this before, when things are so out of whack from the top down. In the 1850s, the entire national federal government was pro-slavery. Every single branch of the government. The Congress had passed the Fugitive Slave Act in 1850 that said you can't help slaves escape and you have a duty to help them be returned to slavery. That was a federal law. The executive branch went along with that by sending federal marshals out into the states to kidnap slaves and return them to slavery. And then, of course, the Supreme Court said in Dred Scott, 1857, that they were in fact property, and this was all perfectly constitutional and legitimate, right? So you have a completely pro-slavery federal government. But not everyone went along with it. Not every state went along with it. In fact, these states did not comply with that federal, unconstitutional, immoral tyranny. We have all kinds of stories of different things that happened. We had state legislatures write bills of nullification saying, not in our state you don't. We had state courts that refused to cooperate with the federal courts and thwart them as much as they could in the legal department. And we had local law enforcement agents in those states frustrating the federal marshals and helping those people to escape anyway and protecting those that were helping them on the Underground Railroad. We've been here before. We did it once, we can do it again. So what's keeping us from doing it? Why aren't we abolishing abortion? It comes down to this thing, and this is what might be a little bit different than what we thought about before. We have no executive leadership. None. Do you see any executives, any chief executives, any governors, any police chiefs, any of them? The guys with the guns, the handcuffs, the badges, are they talking about it? Are they doing anything? There's an entire branch of government doing nothing, and we've been giving them a free pass. So in the beginning, God created man and woman. He created the family. That was His idea of how society should be ordered. Families, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and God was God. On high, He was our King, He was our Father, He was our Creator. But eventually man became more corrupt, and they said, we want a king, we want to do it our way, we have a better idea about what civil government should be. And then, of course, down through Western civilization, we've seen the kind of tyranny and mass murder and genocide that that leads to. And our founding fathers said, why don't we break up the power a little bit? Let's spread the power around. So they said, let's separate it into the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. So what we've all been doing is focusing on the judicial branch, waiting for the Supreme Court to give us permission to abolish abortion. And anytime we've looked anyplace else, it's been to a state legislature, thinking that we've got to pass more bills and more regulations or something before we can stop abortion. And every year, there's some sort of big hoopla about this bill or that bill. Don't kill a kid because he's handicapped. Don't kill a kid because he's a boy or a girl, etc. Oh, don't kill him with forceps or with a knife. You got to use some other instrument. There's always some sort of little dumb regulatory thing that actually doesn't save lives. Every year they pass it. And then the court throws it out anyway and goes unconstitutional, unconstitutional, like those blinking red lights, traffic lights. Don't walk, unconstitutional. If there's no cars coming, just go across the street, people. What's going to stop you? Cross the road. So we don't need the legislature to write another law. Nobody's been paying attention to the executive branch, which upholds the law, the rule of law. They're sworn to do it. So who can actually abolish abortion? It's not the judge and it's not the legislature. It's only the executive has the power, the authority, the duty to stop the shedding of innocent blood physically and literally. That's what it comes down to. A new law would not abolish abortion, would it? Another piece of paper saying abortion is bad, okay, doesn't fix the problem. Legislators don't stop the bloodshed, and neither does a judge. If someone is attacking your family member and beating them up, you don't call a legislator and say, I need you to write another law against this. You don't call a judge to come flying in like a superhero with his black cape and his gavel and say, my opinion is this is unlawful. Right? You get the guy with the handcuffs, with the gun, with the badge, with the duty to stop the attack. That's the executive branch. And nobody's been paying attention to the executive branch. That is the only branch that can bring this to a resolution. Right now, no executives are enforcing the highest law. They're not doing it. That's why we still have abortion. So if they're not enforcing it right now, why would they enforce a new lower law that says it's not good, or it's bad, or it's wrong? See, the kind of executive leadership that would support a new bill of abolition is the kind of chief executive that would already be doing it. So we have to call on the governors to repent and to uphold their oath of office. We have a biblical example of exactly how this works. King Josiah, the greatest king in the history of Israel, came to power at a time when Scripture says they were making their children pass through the fire, literally burning them up to the Baals, to Asherah, to Molech. And King Josiah stopped it. Well, how did he do that? I tell you how he didn't do it. He didn't do it by passing another law. The law of God was already there. He didn't do it incrementally by saying, you know what, we're just going to limit this child sacrifice stuff to Friday nights and Saturday nights when the lighting's good and we're all going to come down together and do it in a safe, legal, state-approved altar of sacrifice or something like that. That's not how he did it. He didn't wage an education campaign in the state schools telling all the kids for a couple of years that child sacrifice is bad, okay? You really shouldn't do that. That's not how he did it. He also didn't wait for a majority. He didn't hire some pollsters and send them out and say, you know what? I need you to count the priests of Molech and Ashtoreth and count the priests of Yahweh, and when we have a moral majority, then we'll stop it. Everybody was doing it, and he didn't wait for a majority. What did he actually do? He didn't wait for that culture to change. He changed it. And he did it by calling a press conference, which in those days meant build a stage and call everybody together. So he built him a big stage like this, called everybody together, and he goes, guys, this is what the law says. And today we follow the law. He tore them down. He made them stop with his executive power. And that's how you stop sacrificing children to demons and devils and demigods. And that's how we're going to do it today. Who stops the bloodshed? It's your chief executive, the guy in charge in your state, because that's where the buck stops, in your state. We have lowly police officers who might want to stop it, but if they go out on their own and do it, they're going to get in trouble with the superior. Who gets in trouble with his superior? Where does this buck stop? It stops with the governor. It's his duty. Why is it his duty? Because he swore an oath to uphold the law as it already is. Our governor, Kevin Stitt, was sworn in back in January. I do solemnly swear I'll uphold the Constitution of the United States, the Constitution of Oklahoma, to the best of my ability. Is he enforcing the highest law to the best of his ability at this point? He has a duty to God, to the constitutions, to these innocent children. The buck stops here. This is their duty. They can step over it and ignore it like they've been doing, or they can pick it up and be a champion who will lead the abolition movement in their states and across the nation. So let's look and ask ourselves specifically what kinds of things an executive could actually do. How would this work out? We've actually published a more detailed plan, but here are just some basics that any governor can probably do in their state that would bring about the abolition of abortion. First of all, let's ask ourselves, what are our governors currently doing? So here's a list of the kinds of things they're involved in right now to abolish abortion or curtail it. Now let's compare that to what they could be doing. First of all, they could call a press conference, build a stage, and they will come. Get the microphones in front of you. Get the newspapers in front of you and say, ladies and gentlemen, here's the law. Here's my oath of office. This is my duty, and I'm doing it. Not on my watch, not in my state. You just announced the end of abortion. Then, because you're in charge, you take the state police or the National Guard, and you send them down there and you shut the places down. Just barricade it. Dr. Alan Keyes has opened my eyes to even more that they could do and go further. We might talk about that later. But just shut the places down. He could then coordinate with the Attorney General and start prosecuting cases. Gather evidence. Oh, we have evidence here that someone was murdered by abortion. Here's the guy who did it. Here's who hired him to do it. Oh, I have evidence on my cell phone and on text and so forth, and I have receipts that my girlfriend killed my kid. And I had no say in it. Let's prosecute. Let's arrest them. There's so many things the executive could be doing immediately. Just tell the people you're going to do it, like King Josiah. The other thing he could do is call a special session of the state legislature and say, I'm sick and tired of all these contradictory statutes that says it's okay to murder people in the statutes. I want you guys to clean it up. Our homicide code's good enough for now, but clean it up. Pass a bill like the Abolition of Abortion in Oklahoma Act. Remove the contradictions and establish justice under the law. Make the lower law agree with the higher law. That should be done. And while that should be done, the question I'm asking today is, but does that take care of the problem? Only the executive can take care of the problem. Only the executive can stop the shedding of innocent blood. So yes, we want to fix our laws, but as we look at how we abolish abortion, let me ask you, who should be leading this? Politically. Politically. Who should be leading this? Christians? The governor? The chief executive? What's going to drive it to a conclusion? Do you think it is more likely that we're going to get, say in our state, 149 legislators who can't agree on anything from contradictory political parties to agree to pass a bill of abolition? Is that going to happen and then go into effect? Or the court's going to throw it out and then the governor's still going to do nothing? Is that going to bring about the resolution? Is that going to drive the issue? Or is it going to be one man pricked to the heart to do his duty who says, no more! We're not doing it anymore in my state, under my authority, in my jurisdiction. God gave me a duty. I swore to God, this is the law, and today it stops. That's what will drive this to a resolution. That's what will get us justice under the law, and that will stop the shedding of innocent blood.